Saturday morning, people.
Woo! Thank you so much for getting up really early on a Saturday morning, especially if you had any Halloween plans last night. We really appreciate you being here. This is our, I believe, 5th Indie Creators Unite panel that we've done. It's a focus on self-publishing, and we have a lot of amazingly talented indie creators here with us today that are going to talk about their own experiences in self-publishing, and they're going to answer any questions that you have as well. Now, you may be an artist, a writer, an inker, a letterer, or simply a comic book fan who aspires to do their own comic book work. You are all welcome here. We are excited to have all of you here, and we want to provide as much time as possible today to answer your questions and to show you 2 things. The first is it is 100% possible for you to create your own comic book. And number 2, there's a very welcoming community of creators like these wonderful folks right here that are going to help you, give their time to talk to you and get you through the process. So please hold on to your questions today. We want to get to those. But before we go any further, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Number 1, we have Gavin Hignight all the way down there.
Hey guys, good morning.
He is the writer on the current Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV series, the graphic novel Motor City, the novel The Freak Table, I could go on and on, also the webcomic The Concrete World. He is very talented. Gavin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
We also have Jody Houser, who is also equally awesome. She is the creator of the webcomic Cupcake Pal. She was a contributing writer on Womanthology. Recently announced she is helming the Orphan Black comic book series through IDW, as well as she is also contributing to Marvel's Avengers No More Bullying comic books. So Jody, thank you so much for joining us. We also have Daniel Corey, who is the founder of Danger Cat Creative Studio, writer of Red City through Image, as well as the writer of Moriarty, both published by Image as well as Prophet. So Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. We have Sebastian Kedlecik, who is the creator as well as co-writer and co-illustrator of Penguins vs. Possums. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us. And last but not least, we have Fanboy Comics president and writer of Identity Thief, the graphic novel, as well as co-writer of Something Animal, the graphic novel. Bryant, thank you for joining us. So one by one, the first thing I'd like to do is to go down the line and ask, why has self-publishing been important to you? And Gavin, we're going to start with you.
I think I always tell people that everything that's come good to me in my artistic career has been my extracurricular activities. So I think for me it was just that desperation and need to, I was in Hollywood, I was writing scripts and no one was looking at them, and I was trying to make short films and I had no money. And I thought, wow, for the same amount of money I put into a short film that looks like crap, I can make a comic book that looks like just like any other comic book on the shelf, and that's what kind of led me into it. And it's those efforts that have gotten me noticed for other stuff that has eventually paid and made it all kind of worth the blood, sweat, and tears.
It's actually not too dissimilar for me. I came out to LA to do screenwriting like so many people do and wasn't making any progress like so many people do. And I just wanted to, it's hard when you go up to someone and you say I'm a writer, but you kind of don't have anything to prove it, because pretty much anyone can say I'm a writer and never actually finish anything in their life. So I had some friends from grad school who were doing a lot of work in webcomics, which I found really interesting. So for me, it sort of just started out as an exercise to just have something that I was putting out regularly that I could point to and say, yes, look, I am meeting a deadline and actually putting work out there. And, it started off as strip comics, which I'm actually still doing with a Cupcake Pal, and that sort of spun into just learning how much I love the comics medium and getting other gigs, and it's sort of really starting to take off now. I'm running a story for Marvel. What the hell?
I'd like to third our first 2 guests here in that came to LA to be a screenwriter. But I had come up and live theater was my background in the Southeast, working in regional theater, writing, directing, and acting and stuff like that. And I worked with some people that were just always encouraging me to, investigate other media, write as many different kinds of things as you can, write stuff that you can own. For example, if you write a novel, whatever, you'll own that. You can license it for a movie or for toys, video games, whatever. It was around 2006-07 when I decided to get into comics, and that was just right when, it was right before Iron Man came out, and Dark Knight, and all this, and so, it was easy to see where things were going. And yeah, it was just like opportunity to make something that you can own, that can grow into something else, that can grow into other media, and that can be enjoyed on its own, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get much sleep, so I'm really trying to keep my sleep up here. But yeah, and self-publishing, if you really want to make a name in comics, start kind of journeying forth in comics, and self-publishing is the way to go if you're a writer. It's just like now Jody's working for Marvel, and I've done some stuff for Image. It all started off because we self-published.
It's so important to me because, as you were saying, it's all possible. So if you're self-publishing something, your story is what gets told. And for me, it came about very organically. I've always loved comic books. I've always loved making comic books. In 3rd and 4th grade, I would trade them with friends, comics that we made and universes that we created. And I kind of never let go of that, even though I got into acting and other stuff. There was always that bit of storytelling in that medium that stuck with me. And I met a very good friend who I work on a comic book with now at a television job, actually. And we just started drawing back and forth, and the next thing you know, we're making a comic book based on something that I had just on a whim created in college. So for me, what I love about it is it does lead to other things, but it's the story that you want to tell, and it's told as soon as you want to tell it. And a lot of, when you're pitching either a script or whatever your story you're trying to pitch to people, there can be a lot of, yeah, that's great, let's do that. And then nothing ever happens. And if you're doing it yourself, you're making sure that it happens. And it's within your control and within your grasp to actually make that thing and fulfill that desire that you have.
Yeah, I just add on to what Sebastian said. I really think that for me, self-publishing is great because it can lead to paying gigs or establishing your credits, but it started out, for me, and it sounds like a lot of people up here, from an initial need to tell a story, and wanting that story to exist, whether I benefited monetarily off of it, I wanted it out there, I wanted to be able to say I did this, and if you have that same urge and you're trying to figure out what medium to go, or you love comics, self-publishing is a possible and excellent way to go.
And one of the things that I want to point out, whether you are a creator yourself right now, or whether you're aspiring to be one, or an artist, whatever you desire to be, the important thing to remember is that even though you're hearing some amazing creators that are working with IDW, Image, Marvel, these are all super exciting things, and we are very proud of them for that. I do want our creators to, with a show of hands, who is currently working a part-time or full job that is not in the industry other than comics? Everybody. Almost everybody. The funny thing about comics is that you probably won't make millions and millions of dollars doing it. It is something that, if you love comic books, this is the industry for you, because it's really hard. You have to constantly pound the pavement, especially if you're an indie creator, but not just if you're an indie creator. If you are working for IDW, Image, Marvel, sometimes it's really, really hard to make that your full-time job and to succeed monetarily simply from that. So please know that if you are a creator right now, or if you're aspiring to be one, there is nothing wrong with maintaining a day job, whether it be a part-time or full job. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. These creators are very, very successful. They are still maintaining other jobs outside of the comic book industry, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I do want to tell you that. As we move into the actual process of creating comics, and we're going to answer a lot of questions today, I want to say to you, if at any time you move through a step of the process of creating comics and you have a question, please just shoot up your hand. You can certainly stop at any time. The most important thing that we want to do is field your questions. So, and I know that for any of you who have created comics, and for our panelists, it's a really, really long process creating a comic, and we could talk for hours about every single step of it. So we're going to do our best to kind of give you an overview of what comic book creation looks like today. So we will do our best to answer all of our questions. But first, we're going to start with finding a writer or artist. Whether you are a writer yourself looking for an artist, or vice versa, I want to talk about, and we can, anyone, if you want to jump in, how do you, if you are a writer, how do you find an artist? How does that work?
I can go, yeah. So Right before we started, a gentleman here had asked me, he said, can you self-publish if you're not doing everything yourself?
Mhm.
And I'm a perfect example of yes, because I couldn't do stick figures, It's all in here and I can see it. I'm a writer, I work with words. So artist is an illustrator is super important to me. The first project I worked on, my friend was a high school teacher, and he had a student, and he was like, this girl is so talented, I don't know what to teach her. And I was like, well, just introduce her to me, we'll make a comic. So he had, worked to teach her more about the career of art because her natural skills are so great. She graduated, and her and I started working together on little baby projects and evolved into the full book. After that, I had to find an artist, and I got spoiled with her because she was really good, but she just didn't want to, go forward. Because, drawing panels is, as you guys know, is very exhausting work, especially for a full graphic novel. So I had actually, for my last, for Concrete World, which is the webcomic that's coming out, I had to go to Craigslist. I searched all my friends, I used Facebook, I used my whole social media, and finally, out of desperation, I just started putting up ads on Craigslist. And the other thing, too, is, you gotta find somebody who's good, the story doesn't really mean anything if the art is not compelling enough to keep you between your pages. And I found a gentleman in Brooklyn, and him and I worked together for 2 years without having even met each other. We would just email scripts, we would email directions and notes, and it was tough. It was tough, and I do pay him. He does get a rate. And to the earlier point, too, about day jobs and stuff, I actually have been spending money to tell my story for the last 4 years. Concrete World will conclude later in the next 6 months. The full story will be finished. I hope then we can get a print deal with somebody and recoup, or I hope then I can option it or something. But I actually spend a good amount of money every month just to tell my story. So, but yeah, Craigslist is how I did it, which is crazy.
Well, I've done it a couple ways. When I first wanted to do a webcomic, and I had friends who were artists, but they really didn't know if I was going to be any good at telling a comic. So, and plus that's sort of a big commitment just to do a little project a month or week in and week out. So I ended up drawing it myself, which is interesting because I'm not an artist. So I sort of had to work around my limited art skills, which is actually a really interesting writing challenge because I envision this great thing, and I can draw a character who's a brick and doesn't move, and I can just use the same art every panel. So I sort of had to work around that. And then when I started jumping on board anthologies, sometimes the editor would like to do a list of artists who are available, or you sort of had to go out and find your own. And that's really where building that social network community is really helpful. Just meeting people at conventions and Facebook groups on Twitter. Because there's artists I've worked with previously who I'm now doing bigger projects with, or artists who were on the same anthology that I became friends with through doing panels like this, and we worked on other things together. So it is very much, aside from just establishing yourself, putting yourself out there and building and keeping those connections.
Yeah, through shows like this, there's a lot of people. I initially, when I first started my company, Danger Cat, I did the Danger Cat's Profit, my first book. It was a matter of, I had a neighbor 2 doors down who's an artist, and I said, do you do comics? And he said, no, he's an oil painter, he's more of a fine artist. But I have a friend who's really great with comics, and introduced me to Anthony Diaz-Shadue, who drew Profit for me, and ended up drawing Moriarty for me at Image. And ended up drawing the Most of Red City with me an Image, So that was, pretty easy. But then, other than that, it was a matter of, I had to find a colorist. Well, then there was a guy named Chris Fenolio who came up to Anthony and I had a table at Image Expo 2012, and this Chris was just a guy who came up showing his portfolio. I liked his work. I had kept his card. About a year and a half later, I called him up. Hey, I need color done on this Image book, Red City. Do you want to do it? So it's just kind of networking, knowing where the community is to shows like this. Also, there's a group in Los Angeles called Comic Book Sunday. It's a once-a-month meetup group where people just kind of get together and hang out and talk about comics, film, and TV, and comic professionals. And the guy who does my letters, Dave Lanphier, I met him through a friend, at Comic Book Sunday. Dave's been nominated for Eisner, nominated for a Harvey, and he does all the letters for all my books. So yeah, it's just a matter of kind of being around, spending some time getting to know people, spending years getting to know people, going to conventions, going to all the conventions. And, yeah, that's how it kind of worked for me.
I can actually speak to the sort of flip side of it because I'm also an artist. So I can, ways that I've found art work or illustrator work is when Penguins vs. Possums came out, I had other indie creators contact me about possibly working on their books. And I have a semi-ongoing indie comic that I just illustrated on, which is really nice because it's a lot less work. But and then I've found work through Craigslist as well. I have an ongoing thing that I do with this guy that I found him through Craigslist, and it ended up being a really great partnership. And then I've also made the rounds on different freelance websites and stuff, and so you can see writers that have their projects that are willing to pay their artists a page rate or an hourly rate even sometimes. So there's a lot of freelance websites like Elance and Odesk and stuff where you can find artists if you're a writer or find writers looking for artists if you're an artist. I think a lot of people do. Being an artist is another great way, but I think there's also a lot, just a lot going on DeviantArt. So it was easier for me to make a connection actually outside of that and go to a place like Gavin said, like Craigslist, or like I said, these freelance websites where there's not a lot of people looking for it, so it's a little bit easier to have a conversation and to get a good gauge of their work, whether they're a writer or an artist or whatever, and sort of start that dialogue. And I've had several. Gavin was talking again about a guy in New York or Brooklyn, and this guy that I started working on a project with, I've never met, but we've Skyped several times to have our meetings, and technology has just made everything wonderful.
Yeah, these guys have pretty much covered it. The only thing I would add that you can see just from what they were saying is your reputation and your friendships really do matter in this industry, just like all others. Like, one way you will find work is the fact that you have worked with someone and they like working with you and will recommend you. If someone needs a writer and a letterist, a color. I go to these guys all the time. If we're looking for somebody, I know that they ask us. So that's a big thing. I would say there's no reason not to be nice to everyone, because you never know when they're going to want to recommend you for paid work or when the reverse, And the other thing, I'll just leave it at that.
But don't be fake nice, because people can tell.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a question. When you hunt around for people, how do you protect your property so that someone doesn't steal your story or your art and run with it?
Sign a contract, a work for hire contract.
Yeah.
Is that just when you're talking, or is that when you actually decide that you're going to work together?
Well, another thing you can do, and man, I've so many of these things, an NDA, confidentiality agreement. You can kind of create like your own little, like now I'm doing it on bigger productions and stuff, so I have to have lawyers and all that horrible thing. But when I was doing it comic book wise, it was like basically like an agreement that was like on paper, hey, so-and-so is agreeing to look at my materials and is in consideration to illustrate it, but, will not, disclose. The other thing you can do, I always do, is register all of my creative material with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. That is more for television and film, but you can copyright anything as a treatment. And a treatment is basically your pitch, right? So a treatment for a comic book is going to basically look the same as a treatment for, it doesn't matter the output medium, it just matters just the core. So I actually, it's just a way to protect myself. Just so I can always say, this was documented, it's $20. I think they keep it on file for
5 years?
5 years, and then you can renew. But everything I've ever done, the other eyeballs are going to see, because I have been burned in the past, and I have to learn the hard way. I register with the Writers Guild, and once you get to I'm going to publish this, then you write it with a copyright, U.S. Copyright Office, which I think is $30. It's a little bit longer process, but in court, this is one thing I learned. If you ever are in that trouble, the Writers Guild document, that basically in court says, you know, I wrote this, so if someone did it, and then they were coming after you and saying, oh, you know, Gavin copied our work, I could be like, oh, no, I didn't, because I had this thing from 4 years ago from the Writers Guild. What it doesn't really protect you from is going after them. So say Gavin wrote this thing, and Party X had copied it. I couldn't take that Writers Guild thing really and say, oh, hey, I did this 4 years ago, but the copyright, the U.S. copyright material, that you can't.
What about the format copyright mailing?
I've never really, I just, it's for $20. I'd rather just do WGA, have it on file. I did that when I was younger, and I don't think it'd ever really hold up. It's just my opinion. Yeah, the other thing too is, I don't know about you guys, but I like that I have a body of work registered with the WGA, you know. I have probably 9, 10, 12 things, and once a year they'll send you a printout. These are all your materials, here's the expiration dates, and I'm like, it's kind of a nice little, oh yeah, I'm doing stuff, you know, it's on file.
And if you believe in your work enough that you feel you want to protect it, it shouldn't be a big deal to invest, you know, 20, 30 hours to do so.
When you are a writer, but you can't draw, like you cannot draw at all, but you want to find an artist to draw the comic for you, is it safe to always look for someone that's new, like very amateur and indie, or is it also a safe idea to also work for somebody that's already established in the field?
Well, and if I could add one thing, because I think that's a great question. One thing I'd like to add for you guys to answer is ways that if you don't have money, perhaps, to pay an artist, are there other ways to perhaps share rights or that sort of thing with an artist so that if you don't have the financial means, you can still get a great artist?
Yeah, you know, for me, and that's a really good question, I think the best thing is to find someone who's at your level. Like, I'm at the level I am for writing. I need to find someone who's at a similar phase in their career for illustrating. So when we put our project together, it benefits me as much as it does them. I couldn't get, I just couldn't afford someone from, who's drawing Daredevil or something like that, you know what I mean? But someone who's as passionate as I am, who wants to prove they could eventually draw Daredevil, that's probably going to be a better fit for me.
I was just asking because I'm friends on Facebook with friends who are artists that have established, that have been established still and do a lot of professional work. And since we're friends, it would kind of be okay for me to like, hey, I'm doing would you like to draw from here? Like, that'd be a safe thing to do with something that.
I always think the strategy for me is I would reach out to them and say, hey, I'm getting ready to do my own book. I know you're really busy doing what you do, but have you met other guys who are kind of at the level I'm at? I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, and if it's someone who's maybe you're Facebook friends with but not super close friends with, if you're going to offer that, you would want to ask, like, what's your page rate? Because, unless it's where you're really good friends with someone, you don't want to expect anyone to work for free.
With the two answers so far, they're right on. You need to find somebody that's at your level. So if you're just starting out, you want to find somebody just starting out. It was it worked out so well for me when I found Anthony through my neighbor Mario. It was because Anthony had all the skills of a pro, but he had not yet drawn his own full-length comic. So that was he was just right in the right place. I had not yet written my first full-length comic, so we were both just right at the right place. I'll just add to what Barbara was saying about as far as working out deals with artists. From my personal experience so far has been just paying page rates. This is the only thing that has worked. So, I've tried to do shares. I've tried to do deferments and such, and that has never worked for me. But it does work for some people. That's just my experience, though. So I would just say, as far as doing anything other than paying page rates to artists, it's difficult. So
I'll agree. I'll second that.
Yeah, I have one project that's like a 40-page one-shot that I'm working with a friend, and she, I was going to ask for her page rate, and she basically told me she would do it for free up front, but the drawback to that is paying work takes precedence for her. So if you can't necessarily afford to pay someone up front, it's going to just take a lot longer because you can't expect someone to work for free when they, need to pay rent and eat. And the other thing we did, because she is working for free up front. The ownership split is 50-50, but the profit split is, I think it's 60-40 in her favor, or it might be 65-35. I don't remember specifically, but a safe way to sort of work that out is usually the artist. You want to, I think, sort of a rough estimate a lot of people do is the artist should get paid about twice as much as the writer. So that's sort of a way to look at it up front. And I've also done deals with people where they are getting paid and I'm not getting paid, but in terms of profit, like I won't get all of the profit until I've gotten half of what they were paid up front, and then we split the profit after that. So
I would say too, I mean, people have gone through a lot of these variations. I would say as soon as you're having those conversations, this is what you should be talking about. So you guys are on the same page from the get-go. And although some of that can be, like the exact split can be a little bit malleable, if you're going to do a split thing, I only say this because I was in a situation where somebody told me, we hadn't signed a contract yet, we were getting that ready. And somebody told me, oh, I'm going to pay you.
Bring this up, right?
You deserve this. But somebody told me they were going to pay me this much for the project. And so I started having all these conversations with them. And they did pay me to do some concept art and to do like one page. And then as we started to get further into it, he was like, okay, yeah, we're on the same page, you and me, we're going to move forward, I'm going to pay you this amount of money. I was like, okay, great. He's like, I'm going to put together a contract, send me an official proposal. I sent him a proposal, and he sent me back, like basically, we were still negotiating, like he sent me back a counter proposal, and it was not that he was going to pay me this much money, it was that once we made a profit, I would get paid this much money. It was a very large project, and for me, had he told me that in the beginning, we would have had much different conversations that entire time. And I wouldn't have felt like I wasted some of my time by having these Skype conversations for free that I thought were leading to a larger project that was going to pay me more money. And as Jody said, if you run into people that are going to work for you for free, there are people that are just like, they're in that stage of their career where they're like, you know what, I just want this under my belt, or oh, this could lead to something else, or oh, it's an anthology, so I only have to do 8 pages or whatever it is. I can fit that into my schedule. But those people may have paying work come into them, and for sure, they're going to say, I need to get this done because it's a deadline, I'm getting paid for it, I need to pay my bills, etc.
I'll just add that for me as a writer and as kind of the originator of the projects that I do, I'll always upfront take ownership over money.
Me too.
Yeah, so if you can own it, or if you own as much of it as you can.
yeah, and I think the breakdown for art is you can get it fast, you can get it cheap, you can get it good, but you can only get 2 of the 3.
Get that tattooed, right?
The only thing I would add is, we were, Family Comics was one of those companies that did start out where we did not have the money to invest in our artist's first project. So like with our first project, we were working with an artist that we couldn't pay. And so there were, I can't go into specifics of the agreement, but the agreement has splits on other things that benefits for them. So I don't think it's impossible to start there, but there are people that think that that's how they're going to work the entire time. And I think just like everyone said here, you do want to get to a place where you're paying a page rate. That's what's expected. That's how the artists make their living, and the more dependable, the more quality artists eventually get there. There are people that get paid because they are known for doing their work and being popular for it. So I think you definitely want to have that in mind. It's not that you can't start without that initial investment, but you do want to have that as your goal to get to the professional level, or at least close to it. But yeah, don't be afraid that you don't have that initial money that you can't start.
So 2 questions on what you're talking about. First off, when you're paying a page rate to somebody, do you often, do you pay up front, pay at the end, split it? And then the other question would be, when you're starting a project with somebody, do you get right into it, or do you normally, will you ask an artist to do 1 or 2 test pages to sort of see if they can get it? And when you do those test pages, do you normally pay for those test pages, or only pay if you end up using them? How does that work?
In my case, when James came on board for Concrete World, that's my my guy out in Brooklyn. He did, there was a previous artist, so I needed to find someone who could match the style. And part of him, it was basically like a job interview for, that's kind of handled it. I was like, I need to see if you can match this art. So first he did some character designs. And they looked good enough for me to continue to be interested. And I know these guys will be like, oh yeah. There's a lot of people that can draw cool looking characters. There's very few people who can draw them in panels and tell a story. So the next for me was like, okay, well, let's do, my comic, we do 6 pages a month. So what I did is I was just like, I committed to 1 month with him. The character illustrations he did pro bono just to show him his chops. The 6 pages, I was like, okay, he's doing panels, I gotta pay him. And I thought to myself, if he draws the 6 panels, or the 6 pages of panel work, and they're terrible, I'll just eat it. It's part of me putting out this comic book. The other thing, too, is that was my chance to show him that I actually pay, and that I'm not, full of BS. So that's how we did that. As for the monthly, and, we've worked together for a couple of years now. I trust him. He trusts me. I just pay him when he shows me pencils. I give him notes. He does inks, and then with inks, I just pay him his rate.
I usually will ask for a couple test pages, and I'll echo what Gavin just said, that seeing sequential samples is the most important thing. If I'm looking at artist galleries online, trying to find somebody considering people, if I see a bunch of great covers and pinups, I'll get excited to see some nice art, but I can't, if this person doesn't have it. If they have, 70 drawings online, but none of it's sequential, then I'm just guessing they probably don't do sequential, and I'll go on to the next one. So I'll throw that out to anybody that wants to be a sequential artist. You got to have sequential pages posted on your DeviantArt.
And make them easy to find.
Yes, make them easy to find. I'll ask for a couple test pages. Usually, I have to submit it to Image to ask for approval. So, I'll get some test pages, and I went through that with Red City. I actually spent a couple of years trying to find the right artist, and there's test pages from all kinds of guys that they all looked really nice, but for one reason or other, the publisher said no. It was a difficult process, but I'll ask for a few test pages. Sequentials are really important, and
for me, most of the stories I've done have gone through an editor, so a lot of the anthologies weren't necessarily paid up front. Like an anthology was to raise money for charity. The one project where I'm not paying the artist, but I'm very privy to them being paid, they're being paid a flat fee for a one-shot story, and they're allowed to invoice for half when the pencils are done and the other half for when the final art is done, because they're doing it and keeping coloring themselves.
As you can see, we could talk about this all day, just finding a writer or artist, but I do want to make sure that we get to the other portions of the creative process. And the next thing that I'd like to talk about is self-publishing versus doing the creation work yourself and then submitting to a larger publisher, which many of our panelists have had both of those experiences. So does anyone want to share their experiences as to what the decision-making process would be for self-publishing versus submitting to a larger publisher?
I'll start if that's all right. When I was first starting off doing Danger Cats Profit book, I met Jim Kruger, who you guys might know him from Marvel or Earth X, and this is a really fantastic guy. He gave me just some really quick basic advice in the beginning that kind of made everything possible, so I owe a lot to Jim. What was the specifics again?
When you would self-publish versus...
Oh, right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't get a lot of sleep.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah. FYI, I'm not a big drinker. I'm not hungover. I just lack of sleep. But
he was up all night working on comic books, guys.
I was.
But Jim, in the beginning, he told me self-publishing. If you're a writer in comics, self-publishing is the thing you got to do to start out. That's how you're going to get your work seen. That's how you're going to be able to eventually work your way up into getting published by publishing companies. And so that's what I did. That seemed to be the way in. And I was doing it back in 2007, 2008, before all this digital stuff really blew up. So it was a little harder than back in the old days, 7 years ago. I don't want to say it's easier now because it's still difficult, but the tools are so much better. The process is very much streamlined. You've got all these options at your fingertips now. But yeah, I mean, self-publishing is just, that's the way to start, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know.
Well, and you could do both. Like I know that I think you talked to me about having a similar approach to it. But like if you're putting together the book, the choice to self-publish or to submit to a larger publisher can happen closer to the completion of the project. You know, like you can go either way. I know plenty of people who the initial intent is to shop it around and see if anyone bites, and if they don't, then they'll go ahead and self-publish.
Right, yeah, that's, yeah, there's that. It's been a while ago now, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that thought process did happen. But yeah, I mean, I was shopping the book as I was putting it together, but for one reason or another, it didn't fit into people's catalogs, and the intent was, I'm going to self-publish this. Maybe we'll see if we can get it picked up, but we ended up self-publishing it. But then my next 2 books were Image, so.
Yeah, for me, and I actually started in 2007 as well, and again, seeing friends who did webcomics and basically built their own sites and posted it themselves, and then there was also things like Modern Tales at that time that were sort of more like a conglomeration of webcomics. And I actually had a background in website design, like back in the day when you could do it all in Notepad. So for me, I already had websites. I had a hosting account, so I basically just bought a new domain and built a website myself. And that ended up being an invaluable skill set for that. But also just the cost of entry for comics with digital and the web now, it's so much lower than going out and finding a printer and having to invest in printing 1,000 copies, which a lot of people don't necessarily have the money or the storage space for up front. So, and I've been doing the webcomics for, again, 7 years now, and I hadn't really monetized them as much. I did some t-shirts. I think my parents didn't even buy one yet. So what that is. But then Comikaze Submit came along, and I was talking to Chip Moser at one of the conventions, I don't remember, and I told him, oh yeah, I do webcomics, and he's like, well, submit it to us. And at that point, I was like, I didn't think they'd necessarily do webcomics, because they're the ones that put out DC and Marvel digital, and why would they want like a bunch of static drawings of cupcakes alongside that? But I put it together. They accepted it. The first 2 volumes are up there right now. I'm still working to put together the 3rd. And again, it's not necessarily going to be a huge income source for you, but it does. It's out there. It's legitimate. It shows that you're actually capable of putting something together that looks good, and it's actually putting together the digital files is really good practice for when you have to put together the files for prints, which, again, as many skills as you can bring in-house and do well will lower your costs, but at the same time, don't sort of cheap out and do it yourself if you can't do it so great, because it's not, you want to invest in the end product, too.
The thing, too, with the self-publishing is so often people will say, oh, what have you done? And this way you have a catalog of stuff that you have done that you can show them, whether that's going to lead to something else or not. And what you were saying about digital, oftentimes too, people say, oh, send me a link to your stuff or to your portfolio or whatever. So even if you have printed versions, I'll still end up having to send a digital file of something or a PDF or whatever. So it's digital has made things great as far as communication and being able to show off your stuff. The end.
The end. Gavin, unless you have something.
To be completely honest with all my personal close friends here, I self-publish because no comic book company wants to do my stuff. I've submitted, I've tried. It's funny because television people like me. I'm writing animation and stuff, but the comic book world is I've never really broken into a company that thought, let's put one of this guy's stories out.
We like you, Gavin.
Oh, well, until now.
That's okay. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Like when Profit, it was like no publisher wanted it, but then we even gave options. So now you're in animation.
Yes, it's fine. Like if I would have waited for someone to put out Motor City, I could still be waiting. Whereas I put out Motor City, and then a writer I knew who was hiring for 4Kids Entertainment that did the old Ninja Turtles cartoon on Saturday mornings that was on for 5 years and no one seems to know existed. They had seen Motor City and they threw me a bone. and they kind of launched my career trajectory that way. But yeah, the nice thing about self-publishing is that you are fully in control of your own universe. If you work with a company, you're going to get notes. If you are hired by a company, you do exactly what they tell you because it's a job, which is fine. Like when I do animation stuff, they say jump and I say how high, and it's still a privilege because I get to play in their universe. But when it's me at home or at the coffee shop on my laptop doing my comic, I'm the little dictator and I get to control that universe exactly the way I see fit. And there's, you have to have both, right? Like you can't always be like that, but on your own project, if you want to be like that, you're like, this is what I'm putting into the world. It's kind of a nice thing.
Being your own, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, on the subject of notes, there are a lot of comic book editors who do freelance work, and it's not a bad idea to hire an editor also to, just make sure what you're putting out is like the best possible version of your edition.
And you don't even necessarily need to hire them because some of them are also building their editorial, just like you're building your comic or an illustrator's building their book. So sometimes an editor will come on board who's just, looking to put more stuff under their portfolio too. So that's another way to look at it.
Being your own niche is, has a lot of value. It's like what Gavin was saying that the publishers didn't respond to his book, and I had publishers didn't respond to my book, but we ended up having response to that work in another media. That's because our books didn't fit into whatever mold was established by the established companies, but that ended up being better for us.
Yeah, I think the hard part to it is marketing and distribution.
Yes.
That is the hardest part. That's why you want to go with a publisher. That's why, But the nice thing, though, is, there's basically one major comic book distribution company, that's Diamond. And if you get in with them, if you make your book quality, and you get your ISBN on the back of that cover, and your cover design is clean, and you get orders through Diamond, the nice thing is your book is not going to, a Rebel Sidekick book doesn't look that much different than another book on the shelf at the comic book store. That's the beauty of comic books. It's still, the little guy can still get in and look pretty cool next to the big guy. But the big guy does have a bigger marketing budget and bigger distribution, and it's tough. The toughest thing for me as an indie guy is marketing my material. And I'm in marketing. I've worked in marketing for years, and it's just because it comes down to money and relationships.
Yeah, and I'd like to come back to marketing and distribution because that's a huge part of the equation, as Gavin said. We did have one question, though.
Just real quick, if you do self-publish, does that stop you from later selling or publishing with a bigger publisher?
You see, Image and IDW do publishing web comics, that kind of thing. So
Dark Horse, too.
Dark Horse, yeah. So I guess there'd be I used to call that aftermarket, but you can have your stuff can be republished. If it catches on, it can be republished by one of these companies. It just depends on who sees it, who likes it.
Faith Aaron Hicks won the Eisner this year for Adventures of Superhero Girl, which was originally a web comic that was for the local Halifax website newspaper or something, I believe. So
I think it depends on your career too. Like say you do a little, a book that can be turned into a graphic novel, and then that leads you to some more high-profile work. It's kind of like an actor. An actor does a really bad B movie and it never comes out, but then they're getting an Academy Award. All of a sudden, some company wants to put that bad movie out. Kind of the same for comics, Like if you have a cool book and it never got a really big distribution, and now you're writing like Batman or something, some company might be like, "Oh, do you have anything else so we could, because your name will be on the cover."
Now, as we said, marketing and distribution, those are two huge parts of the equation when you are self-publishing or when you're publishing with a larger publisher. And since we were just talking about what it is to submit to a larger publisher, even some of those larger publishers, say Dark Horse or Image, will require you to do your own legwork. You will still have to do the marketing on that book. And can our panelists speak to any of that process?
Wow, it's so much work. That's something that I think most people don't take into account. Like, they want to tell a story, they want to do a comic book or whatever, and they're like, oh, I need to write it, someone needs to draw it, and then it's going to be out. But there's so much work that goes into getting it out there, and that takes so many hours and so much of your time, and I really think you need to keep that in mind when you're getting into it, that is a very important part of it, and that takes it from being you and another person making something nobody ever sees to you making something that can audience for your story. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much work it is to do.
It's a constant. It's constant. I guess is the biggest thing to know. It's not like a sprint. You've got to set a pace and keep with it, and that pace might be adjusted on like what level you are and how much new information you have to put out about the project or promotion. But you want to be a consistent presence for those people that do notice you, and we've all. I mean, especially Sebastian is a great example. Like when Penguins vs. Possums first started, they're completely separate from Family Comics. They were self-publishing, as we were also, and now they're under the Family Comics banner.
Thank God.
And we essentially joined forces to help with things like marketing, distribution, and that makes it easier. But there is always someone that has to be there doing it, and the smallest thing takes a lot more time than you think about. We just released issue number 5 this week of Penguins vs. Possums, and the things that people don't think about is that like every image needs to change on the website, so there's now advertising that issue as opposed to the last. We need to put out blasts on various social media. We need to update the online store. We need to send out requests for reviews. There's all these little things that you're like, oh, that's just encompassed when someone says the book was released.
Yeah. Get good at social media and don't be an asshole.
Yes.
Good advice.
I was answering emails on my phone like right before coming in here of book stuff. It just never ends. I always say it's like, I think of it like it's like producing a movie, putting together a comic. When you have 30 people putting in money and planning a movie, it's about the same amount of work as 2 or 3 people putting in the money and producing a comic. It's mammoth amount of work. It can take years. My day job, I work in post-production and managing workflow, and I find that stuff really transfers over into making comics. I end up being it's the writer. I end up being the executive producer of the comic. I find the artist. I got the colorist, the inker, the letterer. I got to make sure everybody's doing their stage of the work and getting the book produced. I'm talking to the publisher, making sure we're getting the street date, blah blah blah. I'm the central clearinghouse for all that. So you gotta be ready for that.
Yeah, I've utilized social media the most for myself because it's the one thing that I don't have to spend to do. It means I spend a lot of time. But the nice thing, too, is I feel like each one of my properties I've met and built and maintained like a nice community. My novel, The Freak Table, the most rewarding, and it's, it was put out, I put it out under the same small imprint that I did my comic. The most rewarding thing to me, actually, for doing that book is meeting the people I met online who could relate to it and talk back to me about it and stuff. And it's almost been like what's so cathartic? It's like this big healing thing we all, like this meeting all these people I don't know online went through just over the subject of the book. So I would get up and I would be excited to check the Facebook page for the Freak Table. It wasn't. It turned from work to actually like, how are all my homies doing? On that page who, can relate. So social media. The other thing I was going to say is you also always have to be and this is marketing wide. You always have to be aware of what's next. 5 years ago, Facebook was fantastic. Right now, I'm putting a lot of push through Instagram because it's social media. You hit where it's hot, and so 2 years from now, Instagram might not be hot. So you want to know where are the eyeballs going. But the nice thing about comic books and Instagram right now is that they're both visual. So I've had a lot of success actually promoting on that. But that's just for now. It could change.
The Tumblr is big. As a writer, I prefer Twitter, and that's sort of where I've built the biggest audience so far. But the thing is, sort of like Gavin was saying, you always want to be aware of what's next, both in terms of social media and your own work. I mean, you're not necessarily just trying to sell one project, you're trying to sell yourself as a creator and almost build a brand around yourself. So, don't just have it be 100% marketing this one book that you're working on right now. Like, talk about other things you're working on, just talk about other things in your life. Be a real person rather than just like a marketing mouthpiece. because, you know, all you're doing is just like, buy this, read this, like people are going to stop paying attention because it's really boring and kind of annoying.
Very quickly they will. And I'll add to her point, share what you like, you know. My webcomic, Concrete World, is a cyberpunk comic. Every time I see cool sci-fi art or, you know, someone on DeviantArt who's doing something, and often it's art that blows our stuff away, I'll be honest. But I just share it because I'm excited about it. I think it's beautiful, and I show it. And then people think, oh, you know what? I like this too. Maybe I would like this, what this guy's world is, you know? So,
and if you support other creators and promote them, a lot of times they'll do the same if they like your stuff.
yeah.
Very briefly, we have time for one very quick last question.
Okay, real quick, just let you know the next thing looks like it's going to be Crusade. A lot of celebrities are getting on that. It's not Tumblr or Instagram, it's a Crusade thing.
Who say, everybody? Get an account today.
And just let you know.
No, it's good to know. I didn't know that.
Well, not a quick question, unfortunately, but I see large pictures and I see the characters and the worlds. I'm not good at writing. I don't do the script very well, and I certainly can't draw stick figures, so you're beyond me on that. How do you get your work and your world and your people out? I've already been asked to help create comic book characters, but then they bowed out, so I have these characters and a world that nobody's going to use. So how do you get your creations out there if you can't write well and you can't draw?
It seems like you'd sort of want to take the approach that Daniel was talking about, where you're sort of the producer in essence of the world. So you would want to hire the people, you would want to find the right writer and the right artist and what other creative professionals you need to make those come to fruition. So, you know, in a sense, you could sort of maybe be like the editor or the producer, whichever term you would want to use. I mean, that's in essence what editors at the comic book publishers do. Like, they might have an idea or direction for a character, but they're not the ones writing it. They're the ones who are finding the right creators to take that project.
Because once you get in there, you might start figuring out how to handle the story.
Yeah.
Get involved in that process.
Writing it's like lifting weights. You know, it is a muscle. The more you do it, the better you're at it. And by going the approach that they suggest, you will probably over time, you know, because if that writer comes to you and they say, let's do A or let's do B, you're going to have an opinion, right? And after a while of sharing that opinion, you'll probably, those muscles will get stronger, and, you know, and you'll be like, well, what about C? Did you think about that one? You know what I mean? I think collaborative process is always, even on your own book where you're the little dictator like me, it's still collaborative process helps.
You never stop learning.
Yeah. And what we do at Fanboy Comics is very similar to what you're talking about. Like, we have obviously creative talents that we like to explore, but a lot of what we're doing is the management aspect, which you could be doing for your talent. If you find a few writers or artists and they like working with you because you are a friendly person to work with, but also take up some of the stuff that we were just talking about that was really difficult, like the marketing, the organization, the scheduling, things like that, keeping all that organized. You can be a really important, exciting hub for people, you know, and it's really to start out with just people that you get along with that need that connective tissue, you know, don't have the means to do it themselves or the time.
A lot of creative types can be really super disorganized, so that's a really valuable skill set to bring into the realm of comic creation.
In order.
So I'm sorry to say, unfortunately, we are out of time for today. I do want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your excellent questions. Before we depart, I do want to say everyone, if you're able, we will be outside if you have any questions to answer those for you. We will also, most of the people here have tables here as well, so you can stop by and see them. But very quickly before we do depart, if you each want to say projects that you're working on and where you can find that work.
For me, everything is just, the hub is gavinhignight.com, and I have cards and some promo stuff for Concrete World I can give to anybody after the show. But I'm moving into TV, so we are working on a project that we're going to shoot in 2015, and it's super, super nerdy, and I can't wait to tell more. So.
Well, the most recent thing that had come out was Vertigo CMYK Magenta. I had a story in there. Avengers No More Bullying comes out from Marvel in January. Orphan Black from IDW should be starting in February. And my website is mindeclips.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Jody_Houser.
Dangercat.com is Danger, K-A-T-T, one word. On Twitter is @DangerCat. Got Danger Cat's Profit on Comixology. Moriarty from Image Comics on Comixology and at your comic book store. Red City Volume 1 is coming out December 3rd, so please be able to look out for that.
Penguins versus Possums. Issue 5 is out this weekend, so you can and should come to the Fanboy Comics table to pick up the latest issue. We also have the trade paperback, which collects issues 1 through 4 available. Penguins versus Possums.com. It's Penguins vs Possums.com. We're on Facebook. Join our community.
For everything for Fanboy Comics, just stop by fanboycomics.net. We've got our publishing line, but also a lot of free stuff, podcasts, advanced reviews, interviews, so giveaways. So definitely stop by and check it out. And what is our booth number?
1351.
So 1300 row, you can find us. Come stop by.
Thank you all for your questions today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.